Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. It's just Marco here once again, and I am here today to talk about something that I wasn't planning on doing, but I just thought it would be a fun thing to do today. I am here to talk about the top 10 movies that inspired my movie. So, first off, number 10, Stalking Laura. This is a movie that, as soon as I saw it, it was like an instant classic. It's, in my opinion, a perfect movie. The performances are really good. The filmmaking is really good. Like, even though this is a made-for-TV movie, it feels like it's something that could easily be nominated for a bunch of awards, and it doesn't really feel like a TV movie except for some of the bad acting from Brooke Shields and a couple of other background characters. But in general, it feels like a movie that, even though it's like a big thing when you're making a movie or when you're doing anything like at a small level, you have to make sure that even though like it is at a small level, that you don't let that hinder you and you don't let that constrain your creativity. Like this whole anti-nudity, anti-sexuality thing, that's a constraint on creativity, because if people follow that the whole time that they're writing anything, they're thinking about, I can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. And that's just not good. And so this movie, I think, is really good because even though this easily could have just been a throwaway movie, they somehow just made this masterpiece, this true crime masterpiece. And I think that, for some reason, it's a movie I'll always go back to for the filmmaking and for just how good the movie is. Number 9 is Bully. This is one where, it's not a small movie. So it's not like inspired off of that. But this is one where I really felt like the filmmaking in this was really impressive and it was really creative and innovative. The person who made the movie, he said there's every type of shot in human existence is in this movie. And he just said, you can find every single shot in my movie, and then the music, the way that the music is used in the film, I really feel like the music in this movie is underrated. The way that he uses it in the scenes, and it completely fits, and it completely just brings you into the scenes, I feel like is really an important thing to study. Because so many movies nowadays, they just have these generic scores. There's nothing really unique about them. There's nothing about them that screams yeah, this is really helping me get into the movie. Everything is just so generic and cookie cutter. But in general, this is another one where I just go back to it anyway. It's like this, and then Stalking Laura, I'll always go back to as inspirations. And then number 8 is Night of the Hunter. This was one where I feel like it has one of the best movie villains ever. And so just the fact that the villain himself, his performance, extremely inspiring. Another thing in this movie is I really love the photography, the cinematography in this movie. You know, there are so many classic shots. There are so many, like, these silhouette shots, noir shots, where he uses shadows. And so there's several points in the film of mine where when I was writing it, I was just thinking about shadows, and I was thinking about in these sets, like I want to have like it look like this and this with these sharp shadows. Another thing is that there's this whole really cool like hour and a half, 2 hour long behind the scenes thing on YouTube, and it's literally just all these different takes that they didn't use. And you can see like the making of this movie right in front of your eyes, and it's really, really cool. Because the Charles Laughton, the guy who made this, he basically didn't make any other movies at all because people hated this one when it came out. And so it's really cool to see like the making, like the behind the scenes of this like classic movie from the 50s. Another thing is that I really kept this movie in mind because it was made and released the same year that my movie takes place. And so I have several references to the movie in mind, including the song. There's a song in the movie, and I have it in mind twice, and I have a certain character humming it. And I thought that that would be cool because it shows that like these guys probably, or yeah, one or some of these characters, they must have seen this movie earlier that year. And so, you know, they're referencing it, and they're thinking about it, and it's in the back of their minds like it would have been in real life. And, you know, the same way that, you know, you have all these modern movies with these references. For some reason, when they make movies nowadays that take place in the past, they don't really have references to other movies a lot. Like, a lot of the times it's just actors, or it's just like music and stuff. Like, you know, whenever there's a movie in the 80s, it always has to look this ugly reddish orange color, and then there's always got to be those same songs that they play over and over and over again, and then people have to have the poofy hair, and it's just all the same things. And I was trying to find ways to kind of have like little innovative ways of referencing that didn't feel too forced, but just felt more like, oh, they're people in this year, you know, they saw this movie that came out this year. That's pretty real. And then number 7 is Topkapi. This is a movie where I think a lot of what was inspiring was the style and the aesthetic of the movie. You know, yesterday I talked a lot about, you know, Michael Bay-isms and Pain and Gain, and how his style really just weighs everything he does down, because there's good story and good characters, and they're trapped inside this Michael Bay fluff. With Topkapi, I think it's quite the opposite. I think that, you know, the whole time, the style and the aesthetic really works well and blends in with the whole story and the characters. And so, in particular, the opening sequence in this movie was extremely, extremely cool and interesting. You know, there's all these really cool, flashy, colorful shots of, you know, random things, and, you know, they all seem to make sense somehow. And meanwhile, the main woman, she's kind of narrating over it, and it's just really, really, really cool. And so I actually did shoot a 12-minute long opening sequence, or I mean, not opening sequence, opening credits sequence, and I very much like used this as an influence. And then as well, there was this one scene in the movie that I was really having trouble shooting because, what happened was, I shot a, what do they call it? A split screen sequence, and it was perfect. The characters, they really worked perfectly, and, everything was timed perfectly. Like, even though I didn't prepare or plan at all, these two videos, they just matched so well. But the problem was that one of the videos was shot at an angle, and so I could not combine the two split screen videos together. And it made it to where the sequence would have been unusable, and I would have had to go up and shoot the sequence again. However, after watching this movie in the opening credits, I thought, wait a second, I can put a still image of this certain picture on the screen, and it'll make sense when you see the movie. And then I can put the two videos, I can kind of add in clips of them and sort of like make it to where it's like this abstract sequence where, they're talking to each other, and you have this picture, and the videos, they get bigger and smaller, and, there's one point where the video just takes up the entire screen, and I thought, this is perfect. It's absolutely perfect. It's much better than if I would have just had the boring split screen. I mean, I kind of wish that I could have gotten just one shot of, like, the two characters walking up to the desk, but I was not able to, and now I'm obviously not going to be able to at that place, so it just worked out to where I saved that sequence, and it turned out really well. Next up is The Devil and Daniel Webster. This is a movie where it was kind of on accident. It was kind of like a reflex, kind of like something that just, it inspired me from the back of my mind somehow while I was writing the movie and everything, and then shooting it too. So this movie is a movie that I saw quite a few times as a kid, and I really liked the movie, although as a kid I didn't really get into the second half. It just, for some reason, it didn't really come across me I just wasn't able to absorb it very well because I was so young. But I really loved the first half, and I loved the characters, and then I loved the ending. And so what happened was, the character of the devil, I thought he was a really cool character, and there is a part in that movie where, and I just watched it again recently, it's pretty good, but there's a part at the end where he comes up to the screen, and it really used to scare me as a kid because he would look at the screen, and then he would laugh, and he would point at the screen like you're going to be his next victim, and it was actually really scary. And so there's actually a part in the same sequence I was talking about with Topkapi, where I was shooting this sequence, and for some reason, I just had the inspiration to just go right up to the camera and kind of look into the camera, and it's a really creepy looking shot, but kind of goofy too. And I was like subconsciously inspired by this movie that I had seen from, years and years ago without even realizing it. And then I rewatched the movie and I was like, oh wow, oh yeah, that kind of reminds me of that. So, number 6 is Moon. This one was really, this was really funny because I watched this after I had finished the first draft of the script. And I was trying to find movies where there were doppelgangers. I was trying to find movies where they took place in a very small location or limited locations. And this was a movie that had both of those elements. And it has Sam Rockwell, who I think is pretty damn good. So the movie turned out to be where it was perfect. It was the perfect movie to watch. And the music was I think the music to this movie, I cannot listen to it at all. Because it's so depressing that it's like a depression pill, like each and every song in the whole movie. And it's really hard to listen to. And so, the movie too, it was very, very bleak and dark and depressing. And I kind of just saw when you make a movie of any kind, or when you write a story of any kind, it's kind of good to look at other movies and stories that are kind of similar, because it's almost like you're seeing your movie on screen, even though it's not yours. And so it's kind of like getting you into a mindset where you can, further write and come up with better things and everything, and kind of be like, oh, would this work on screen? Would this work on screen? And the music really helped too, because there's a lot of songs that I've created for this movie, and I was really inspired by just how simplistic a lot of these songs were, but how effective they were at the same time. And so I'll just use probably the most recent one as an example. So there are 2 restaurant sequences in the movie where people are at this restaurant eating, etc. And I thought, and I just kind of experiment around. There's this app, I can't remember what it's called, but they have all these different instruments for free, and I just kind of play around until I can find something that works. It's really like there's no real way to make music. You just make music, period, and then it either works or it doesn't. And this song, I was just kind of just playing around, whatever. And I ended up adding all this fuzz and distortion to it, and to make it sound really creepy and weird and disturbing. So what I did was, I thought a really cool idea would be to use the creepy sounding song for the second restaurant sequence, and then use the normal sounding one for the first restaurant sequence. So it's kind of like a contrast there of it's the same song, but it's different tonally. And so it's why is it different? You're thinking about theme and how it's effective because of the scenes and the characters, and how the characters have changed in the movie. So I thought that that was a particularly inspirational point with the music and everything. And I was also thinking too, I could try to make some music that a restaurant would play. And I thought, never mind, I'll just make some song that I want to make, and that'll be a lot easier and a lot more I don't know, it just works perfectly though. I can tell that, it's going to work really well with the scenes when I get to shooting them. So, oh yeah, I also saw some of the story elements. I felt like they didn't really work as well. And so I kind of saw things like, ooh, I'm probably not going to do that. Ooh, I'm probably not going to do that. So that was another kind of thing, was like, I saw some of the things I was thinking about doing, and I was like, never mind, I'll do something different. In particular, now I'm not saying that these two characters fight in my movie, but there is a scene in Moon where Sam Rockwell fights himself, and I just think it looks terrible. It looks absolutely terrible. And you can tell that these, it's the same person, and they have to shoot like a million different shots to make it effective, and it looks like trash. And I just hate it. I think it's terrible, and it completely took me out of the movie. So it kind of made me think, like, I want to avoid these characters coming into contact with each other, period. Like, when they hand each other things, they can hand each other things off screen. Okay? Like, I don't want these characters, I don't want the streams to cross, like in Ghostbusters. I don't want the fucking, the streams to cross. So number 4 is The Shining. This is another one where it's just inspirational in general. The way that it's made, the filmmaking of this movie is just perfect. I love all the wide shots. I was very, very inspired by, like, the wide shots in this movie of the scenery and the hotel. And so when I was coming up with the opening credits, I was thinking about the opening credits to this movie. And I actually found this stock footage where the scenery looks a lot like in the opening of The Shining. And so I used that footage in the opening credits of my movie, and I think it works really, really well. And then I thought about the hotel when I was coming up with the main mansion for the movie, because I was thinking about this mansion. It has to look like a horror movie mansion, and it can't just look like a mansion from just anywhere. And they've talked about how horror movie houses and mansions, how they're so different than regular ones, and you can see all these little differences. And so yeah, that was another point of inspiration for the movie. And then another one, of course, well, I can't really spoil it, but you'll know it when you see it. And then number three is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? And so this was another movie where I was trying to find ones that took place in one environment or just a very, very limited number of places, because I thought I need to see, like, other people and how they used, like, just very few places to do this whole movie. And this is one where, like, basically the whole movie takes place at this house, and then they briefly go out to, like, a dance hall, and then they come back to the house. And it's perfect. It's a very good movie. And it's just so entertaining because these characters, they have so much chemistry with each other, and the dialogue is just perfect. So I really tried to pay attention to the dialogue. It's really tough writing dialogue for characters who, they're from a time period that you weren't in. And then also the fact that, some lines you think they sound good and then they don't. And so I really tried to think about the dialogue after seeing this movie. And so the biggest influence from this movie was the dialogue. There's lots of to me there's lots of similarities in terms of just like the amount of dialogue and the amount of just scenes where characters are in a room talking, very similar to this movie in terms of that. And so I was really thankful that I chose to watch this movie finally. Number 2 is Dead Ringers. Now, I've already talked about this before on the TV show, Terrible TV Show Episode 1 review. Okay, so this movie, as I've said before, I do not like it very much. The first half is really, really good, and it feels like it's building to something really interesting. And then the second half just completely fails. And, you know, it's unfortunate because you have these two main characters and they're just so perfect, and it's the same guy and he's doing like an Oscar-worthy job is this doppelganger, and then of course his other doppelganger, you know, twins. And it was very inspiring in terms of his performance. And so I tried to find some behind the scenes of Jeremy Irons talking about acting in the movie, and it did help. And I used it to try to affect my performance. And so what I did was, it's kind of a lot more like pathetic and compared to the like just the subtle way that Jeremy Irons did it. So originally in my movie, the doppelganger character, he was not supposed to wear anything except for just the same clothes that the main character was wearing. And he was just supposed to have something a little bit off about his face. Like, just something a little bit off about his smile. But I couldn't figure out how to do that, really. You know, I was going to have this makeup artist, but then she turned out to be arch nemesis. And so, arch nemesis number 1 of 2022. So what I thought was, I have this mask. It's like a generic mask from Michael's Arts and Crafts store. And I put it on, and immediately I was able to get into the other character. So I added that into the character, and it really helped because it became like a central point of his character to have this mask. You know, it became a central, like, just, I couldn't imagine, now that I've shot all this footage, I couldn't imagine, like, making a version of the movie where he doesn't have the mask. And the way that I was kind of inspired was that Jeremy Irons, what he did was, number 1, he said that one character, he would talk like from a deep down place inside of his like chest, and then he said the other character would talk from like inside his throat, and so it was a lot like lighter. And I thought that that was helpful. But then another thing is that when he played one character, he would wear weights on one ankle. And then when he would play the other character, he would wear weights on the other ankle. And so I thought that the whole mask thing would work in that same type of way. And it did. So suck on that. And in general, as I've said before, I saw this movie and I thought, I wouldn't ever want to remake this movie ever, because I don't want to make a gynecology movie. unless it's like a comedy or something. But I would like to make something where I improve on whatever the fuck this was. And so the whole time coming up with the story, the whole entire time, 100% of the time, I was thinking about this is something that I would have done. There's a lot of things that I would have done if I would have made Dead Ringers. But the movie that I wrote, that was just one of the ways that I could have done it. And so, basically, it's one of the reasons that this movie even exists is because, I just was so disappointed in Dead Ringers. And that's something that frequently happens, is that I'll get really, really disappointed by something. Better Call Saul! and I'll get really angry and be like, no, why did you waste this? Why did you waste these actors and waste this, just everything? Like, I'm going to make this, I'm going to make it, or try to make it better, and then be happy because at least it's not this crap. So the last movie, this is a movie that has consistently been my favorite Frankenstein movie. And that is Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. That's number 1. This is a movie where they really tried to think outside of the box. And I've really loved this movie ever since I saw it as a kid. I watch it every year at Halloween time. There was one year where I carved pumpkins and watched it, and it's the perfect Frankenstein movie because not only does it think outside of the box, but it gives you all the elements of a great potential Frankenstein movie in the one movie. So you have the Dr. Frankenstein. He's really smart. He's badass. There's this scene where these characters are saying really stupid things, and they think that they're smart, and then Frankenstein, he just completely puts them in their place and outsmarts them. And then you have the assistant character, and I think that in the Hammer Frankenstein movies, they were really lacking on having a good assistant character. And in this movie, they have a really intriguing story where it's a couple, and he forces this couple and blackmails them into helping him, and they work really well with him. They're really perfect, and it just, the whole movie, there's this undercurrent of tension because, they're being blackmailed, and so it's really uncomfortable to watch, like, everything that he does to them. And of course, there is one thing that I don't like about the movie, which is there's this really, really stupid rape scene where Frankenstein rapes the girl and the main couple. And it's just the most stupidest, like, unnecessary thing I've ever seen. And it had no point at all. Like, it never came up again. It was just like Dr. Frankenstein is Dr. Frankenstein, and he's in a mood. He's in a weird mood. And, like, there's not even any dialogue in the scene either. It's just like he walks into her room and he rapes her, and it's like, what the fuck is this? It's a fucking Frankenstein movie. Like, what the fuck? And in particular, in terms of inspiration, I would probably say the biggest inspiration was the whole element of coffee. And so frequently in the movie, the main woman, she makes Dr. Frankenstein coffee over and over and over again. And it's like a running theme that she's the coffee girl. And I applied that to the main character in mine. And I thought that that would be a fun little reference. And in general, too, besides the assistants, you also have like a good amount of victims. So I think there's like 2 or 3 victims in this movie, not even counting the ones that were victims before the movie began. There's quite a bit of blood and violence. That's another thing that every Frankenstein movie almost should have. And in general, it's another movie that it doesn't really take place at many locations. Like, most of the movie just takes place in this hotel that is run by the main couple. And so it was another sort of method of, or just a way to like picture making something in this really limited space. So, those are the top 10. There are probably a couple more, but the inspirations really aren't big enough for me to be like, yeah, that was really one of the top 10 inspirational things. But I hope that this video was useful. Please like this video, comment, and tell me what you think of these 10 movies. And then please subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see more behind the scenes videos. This is technically like a behind the scenes video, because I'm sure after watching the movie, you're going to be able to watch this video and be like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, throughout the whole thing. So goodbye everybody, see you soon.